Bob's Ghost Stories. When I was a kid, as I stated, my sister and I were subject to, I think it was, I remember saying it was like a ghost that looked like a cowboy. We also used to talk about there was a ghost that messed with the air conditioner, would turn the air conditioning up and down, in our house when I was a kid. And just general weird spooky things like shit falling over. One time there was nobody in our living room and this glass bowl fucking fell off the shelf and broke. Doors opening and closing inexplicably, all that jazz in our house in Florida. There was one time we were playing hide and seek, and I was hiding under the bed, and my sister's my-size Barbie was under there, and I turned over and looked at it, and then its head turned and looked at me, and I screamed and ran out of the room. So there was that. Yeah, we had, but when we moved to Ackworth, there was a couple of occasions, where really spooky shit. I guess the opening thing is, one time I was wandering through the woods and I found a fully assembled wooden bed out in the woods. No idea why it was there. I don't know how to explain the uncanny valley feeling of, you're just in the woods, there's nothing but trees for what appears to be at least a couple miles, and then there's just a random wooden bed completely assembled in the middle of the woods. Keep in mind this would be before YouTube or any of the times people just started doing stupid shit, so somebody randomly just put together a wooden bed in the middle of the woods. We tried to, my friends and I at the time, we tried to find it again and sleep on it to see if anything. We thought maybe it was like a spooky dream bed that would take you to another dimension or something. I don't know. So one night I'm in my room and I have this white radio, and then voices start coming through the radio, and I thought it was just interference from another radio signal at the time, but they would be like, dude, they just sounded completely demonic. And then one night I literally heard a woman screaming, help me, please help me. And then it was followed by children laughing, and then a guy screaming, into the radio. So I went and got my mom, and these occurrences happened almost every night at 3 in the morning. And my mom comes in there and she hears nothing. So the following night at 2:50 or whatever, I went and got my mom and I told her to wait, and we waited exactly 10 minutes, and at 10 minutes my mom's like, I'm going back to bed, I have to go to work, and then it happened. The radio went off and the voices started talking, and she was like, oh my god. Like, it sounded like nuns singing, and then it just turned into shrill screaming voices and people making death threats and shit, and my mom was like, what the fuck, like, oh my god. So she was like, unplug it, and I unplugged it, and then it kept going, and my mom was like, take the batteries out of it. I flipped it over, and I pulled open the battery compartment. There's no batteries in it. The damn thing was still on, the lights were still on, and the voices were still going, and then it just cut off about a couple minutes later. And then my mom was like, put the radio in the attic. So I put the radio in the attic. Years later, I had to get the Christmas decorations down from the attic. When I was up there, the radio turned on, and we would hear it. Sometimes at night, you would hear the radio at night. You would just hear voices coming from the attic, and it was that radio would just turn on. I was up there, and that radio turned on, and it was just some kind of like noise coming from it. And I swear it said, I'll kill you, Bobby, or whatever the fuck. And then the radio cut off. And that Christmas, I took that down, and I suggested we give the radio away as a present. My mom refused to do that. We got into an argument about the radio, which she finally told me to put it back in the attic and just leave it there. Don't ever touch it again. Don't bring it up. We're not going to talk about it. We're not going to destroy it. My mom had a thing about something to do with Ouija boards, because my sister played with Ouija boards when we were kids. About if you destroy a Ouija board, it leaves the gate to the other side open. So if we destroyed the radio, it would leave the gate to the other side open. I try to avoid spiritual shit, even though there's a lot of spirituality in my family. Real spirituality, not pseudo church bullshit. We had a night I was sleeping on the floor in my mother's room, and a lightning bolt struck the side of our house, and it brought back to life a dead it was an animatronic bear, like one of those like Valentine's bears that sang a song. I think it was like Wild Thing You Make My Heart Sing or something like that. It had like a flashing nose. This thing was dead, okay? We bought it from the thrift store. It didn't have batteries in it. It was dead. And it got struck by lightning. And then every night after that, at midnight, that bear would go off. Okay? It would go off no matter what. And it was like clockwork. It would go off every night at midnight, the same hour it got struck by lightning. Spooky and, I guess, uncanny events. When I was a kid, Easter egg hunting in Florida, I was in the front yard, and the rain stopped right over our neighbor's house, right at the gates of our house. And my sister and I finished our Easter egg hunt, and right when we finished our Easter egg hunt, the rains fell right onto our house as we went back inside. Now, Florida's unstable rains are just kind of a thing. You can literally, if you drive on the interstate, you can drive into a shower and out of a shower. So, but to me, this is a unique experience. The same thing happened in Georgia at my stepdad's house. We were doing Easter again, and it started raining. And the rain just stayed right at the fence, and my mother was like, that is so fucking weird that the rain is just staying right at the fence. And then finished the Easter egg hunt, went inside, and then it started raining directly onto our house again. Yeah. We used to see a ghost, and my dog Chewbacca, he would react to it. There was a specter of a type that stayed at my stepdad's house. He came in through the back door. You would hear the back door slam. You'd hear the back door open and slam shut. And my mom would be like, welcome home, Mr. Brown, because that was like my stepdad's like great-grandfather who lived there. She just assumed it was that guy. And sometimes you'd smell like eggs being cooked or whatever for no reason. I don't know what was up with that. But one night my dog Chewbacca, who did his rounds, is what I called it. He would inspect the entire house. Like every door had to be open, and he would go into everybody's room and make sure everybody was okay. One of the nights, because he was not an aggressive dog, he was a very loving animal. He was absolutely like just the softest, like cuddliest doggo. He was in my room, and he just started growling, and he was looking toward the door, and he was just frozen stiff, growling. And at first I thought it was just some kind of arbitrary noise. And then I looked at him, and I saw, like, his teeth raised. You could see his teeth, and he was just, like, almost possessed, like, fucking angry, like, super aggressive. I touched him, and he snapped at me, and then he looked back at the door, and then the door closed. One of the, this is kind of a weird, uncanny event. This is a quantum mechanic thing. In quantum mechanics, if you do something like 1 trillion times, eventually a random effect will happen, and that's just the same thing in life. I was standing in my door. I didn't do this 1 trillion times. I had the door in front of me, and I was slapping it back and forth like this, and I was talking to my friend at the time, and then the door came, hit my hand, and my hand phased right through it, and the door went that way. That's pretty spooky, right? My hand just going through a solid object. And my friend saw it, and he was like, holy shit, dude. Yeah. The only thing I remember feeling was my arm felt cold when that happened. He was like, that's fucking crazy. I would hide under my blanket at night, and I would see shadow figures and shit, like, crawl across my bed. Sometimes it literally felt like somebody would sit at the foot of my bed, and sometimes I'd hear moaning, or sometimes I would hear humming, or some type of like low-key singing in my room. This is an old-school Victorian-style house. You need to be reminded of at my stepdad's house. That's where these spooky things happen. Most of these spooky things. Yeah. My mother, at my Aunt Joy's house, my mother saw this family that was like an Oregon Trail family standing at the foot of her bed, and she told them to go away. I used to get the feeling in my Aunt Joy's house like somebody was watching me, but the same thing would happen in Florida at my house, where it just felt like somebody was watching you for no reason. When I was a little kid, I had an imaginary friend. His name was Yugni. And Yugni was like the best dude on the planet, but he was for some reason dressed like 1930s fucking criminal. And I used to hang out with him, and I also used to have another imaginary friend that was a girl. I used to play with, and my mother got really concerned about my imaginary friends. I mean, the cure for imaginary friends is to just give somebody real friends. That's what the cure for it was. Yeah, when I was a kid, I mean, imaginary friends are always kind of creepy, but, you know, kids have imaginary friends. It's a normal developmental thing. Kids have really good imaginations. So, yeah, there's those, specific events. Dude, I have so many fucking ghost stories. So, it was when we were in the house. I told my mom that I saw this thing standing in the middle of my room. It was a shadow figure. And I thought it was like Ganondorf from Zelda. At least that's what I imagined it being. But like, and I would see it, and my mom swore it was just shadows. That one night I was sleeping, the moon was a full moon, and the windows in my room were open, and the tree got blown by the wind. And it created the look of a witch on the floor. It looked like there was a witch with a hat, like riding a broom, shadow on the floor of my room. And the shadow was so real, it spooked my mom, so she screamed and woke me up, because she thought that there was somebody standing at my window. And then she said that she knows what happened. It was the moon reflecting off of the tree, reflecting off of the solar winds. Like, I don't, whatever. And she said what I was witnessing wasn't like actual shadow figures, that I was basically making it up. And after a while of harassing her, she eventually said, "Look, Bobby, your Uncle Doc, you said, like, when you were born, that the Dark Ones don't want you to reach, like, full actual, like, realization. He doesn't want you to reach, like, adulthood, because you'll be a threat to them if you become, like, an adult. Like, you'll become the biggest threat to them." And you basically told the story of my brother being born with like a golden halo or energy with these guys dancing around him. He's like magical or something. I don't know. Now keep in mind, I thought I was Hindu for the longest time, but then I found out that we're Zoroastrian, which makes us like magi. And magi have a history of spooky shit. So anyways, these shadow things, I would hear them and I could see them. They'd whisper things to me, violent tendencies, hatred, rage, and like the Furies of Rome or Greek mythology. They would just say crazy shit to me. And then I made up my own religion based off of the video game The Legend of Zelda, which I guess was pretty cool, and I did a pretty terrible job at running it, because the only people that were a part of it was a bunch of kids that stole shit. One of them was a rapist, so there's that. The Dark Ones are attracted to me. Yeah. So, there was one time a squirrel jumped into the transformer beside our house and got barbecued, and there was this huge blue flash of light. That was pretty crazy. And ball lightning. There was ball lightning in Ackworth. I watched it go down the power line when I was a kid. That was fucking crazy. That looks like some supernatural phenomenon. Yeah. Years later, my friend Log and I, we were, hanging out at the fire. We were having a bonfire at my house, and he saw some sparkles in the woods, and they started coming closer, and then they stopped. And I told him to ignore them, they can't come any closer. And then he was like, "How come they can't come any closer?" And I was like, "Because I have a barrier that protects me." I was like, "It's just a thing in my family. I don't talk about it, but I have the power of purification, and things won't come near me." And Log was like, "What?" And I was like, "Exactly." I was like, "I don't buy into it. It's fucking stupid." And then we went to Walmart, and the sparkles followed us, and the entire time Log was like, they're behind us, dude, they're catching up on us, they're gonna get us, we're gonna die, like, and he's telling me this shit, and I'm just like, brother, you need to calm down, like, it's fine, stop looking at him, it's fine, stop looking at him. A Log one time during at one point, Log walked toward the sparkles, and they couldn't get any closer. But then when I walked toward them, they retreated, and I was explaining to him this is what's going to happen every time. They're going to retreat as I walk forward because they're evil. And the, so yeah, there's that. Trying to think. I mean, I'm kind of just running through these when I should really go into more detail about the spookness, but I guess this is whatever. There was the inexplicable, nah, I don't really want to tell that story. I used to hang out in the woods a lot, and one time I found an exposed gas main, but that's not like real spooky shit. We went camping one time. Yeah. We went camping one time, and I had a dream that I had woken up in the middle of the night, and some lady, some woman, had, like, hypnotized me, like, spoke to me while I was near the campfire, and got me to walk out in the middle of the lake during the night. Yeah. In, like, Allatoona. And in the dream, I walked down where these giant rocks were, and then off of this cliff, and then into the water, where a bunch of hands came up and grabbed me and pulled me underwater. And then I drowned. When I woke up the next day, my entire sleeping bag was completely soaked, which I believed I had peed myself. It stank. It stank horribly. It smelled awful. And then when I went outside the tent where we had this little area where you put your shoes to keep them dry, my shoes were soaked. Like, they were completely soaked, and they had, like, fucking, like, mud on them. Which was really weird because I hadn't done anything with them. And then to make things even weirder was, I think it was, like, my cousin. He asked me where I went because he said that I had gotten up out of my sleeping bag during the night and said I was going to go take a pee, and then I basically just didn't come back. And then he said, like, when he woke up this morning, I was just there, beside him, and I was like, I don't know, I told him, I was like, I think I peed my fucking sleeping bag, and I told him about my crazy dream. I guess that's pretty spooky, I think that one's kind of spooky, like, if somebody told you that, like, that's definitely a good campfire tale. When I was being pulled out there to the lake, I kept thinking about this dead girl, that was, like, found, and she was, like, in the newspaper. You know, that could be just psychological, though, the nightmares and sleepwalking and shit. I used to sleepwalk, too, when I was a kid. I had a thing for sleepwalking into my mother's room and laying down on the floor. I don't know why I did that, but I did that a whole lot. My brother, apparently, according to my mom, my brother was the ultimate sleepwalker, because he could actually do things while he was asleep. He had the motor skills to do things while he was asleep, and he'd be completely out cold. And apparently, between me and my brother, I could be commanded. You could tell me what to do while I was sleepwalking, and I would do it. Yeah. I had auto-suggestion. I don't know what was up with that, but kids, you know, they go through the night terror stages, so, like, yeah. We had, my mom absolutely loved those, sensor animatronic, like the singing fishes and shit. And this was back at Randall's house, my stepdad's house. We were in the living room one Christmas, like, and all of a sudden, all the sensors triggered on those fish, and they started singing and dancing for no reason. And this went on for about 3 hours. where those fish would just get triggered and they would just keep going as if somebody was just standing in front of them triggering them. That was pretty crazy. Yeah. I think that's about all the spooky stories I got. I mean, sometimes I used to see people standing in windows and waving at me, and then I'd find out nobody lived there and shit like that. Yeah.